Well, as we head into the next week or so, there's going to be some people that when they wake up Christmas morning, there's going to be a cute little cuddly doggy under the tree. You'd be surprised how many people actually get their pets during Christmas, their dogs during Christmas. And there's just something cute about this little bundle of snuggles, right? There's a sense of comfort and, I don't know, just sense of joy, and dog's little mouth kind of gnawing on you a little bit, running around. Super cute. For about 2 weeks. About 2 weeks. Then the diarrhea comes because they ate something they weren't supposed to. And you find yourself cleaning up messes one after another. The furniture starts getting tore up because there's a lack of training. And then they start to smell and they need baths. And then the behavioral issues come. And then you want to travel and, there's a babysitter that you need. And depending on your dog, maybe they can go with the babysitter, maybe they can't. Maybe family can watch them. And then you got to pay for the food, not to mention medical. And this is about a 10 to 15-year commitment that you didn't think through. This is not your mama's Christmas. And so there's almost like this false sense of comfort. So cute, and then they grow up. This is my beast. Just got done taking out a squirrel. He's got dirt on his nose. He requires a lot. And I just remember bringing him home, and he was so cute, so cuddly, and now he's a beast. Incredible dog. But I think so many times when we bring home a little puppy, there's a comfort that's not rooted in reality. Because we forget that when you bring a dog into your house, it's not just comfortable, it's transformational. Like life changes. It really does. So many people during COVID, everybody had time, felt a little lonely, scrolling online, like, I should get a dog. And now, a lot of regrets. Shelters are full, rescues are full, because there's this idea of, I just didn't sign up for this. I signed up for the comfort, but not the transformation. And I want to say that I think this is the reality of Christmas. This is the reality of Emmanuel, God with us, is that it's not just comforting, it's transforming. It's transformation that goes beyond a superficial comfort that gets to real comfort, lasting joy. Not superficial, but transformational. Not just comfortable, but the game actually changes to where it goes beyond the superficial to real lasting comfort and joy. And we're gonna go back to Matthew chapter 1 today. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. Now, can I just, again, remind you that Emmanuel is not just a truth to comfort us, but a truth that transforms us. And we see this clearly declared in the Old Testament of the Messiah to come, and we see the reality of this in the New Testament. When Jesus came on the scene, Jesus, you have to understand, was fully God and fully man. God in the flesh, God with us. If you miss one of those aspects, you get a distorted picture of Christ. But Jesus didn't come and just say, hey, I'm another great teacher, I'm another great prophet. No. He made a huge claim. He claimed to be God. God in the flesh. John chapter 1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, speaking of Christ. Acts chapter 20, so guard yourselves and God's people. Feed and shepherd God's flock, his church, purchased with what? His own blood. With God's own blood, over which the Holy Spirit has appointed you as leaders. No pressure for us pastors. This is no ordinary man. Luke chapter 7, Jesus is sharing a meal at a religious leader's house, a Pharisee's house, and a woman comes in and she is just broken before him. Just an overwhelming sense of worship and gratitude. She falls to his feet and her tears begin to wash his feet. Her hair she uses to dry. She takes perfume and anoints his feet. And the religious leader is thinking to himself, if he only knew this woman, If he only knew this woman. And Jesus is like, oh, I know. I know this woman, and I know what you're thinking. If you don't think that he doesn't know what you're thinking, he knows what you're thinking. And he says, I tell you, her sins, and there are many, have been forgiven. So she has shown much love. He who's been forgiven much loves much. But a person who's forgiven little shows only a little love. The truth of the matter is we all need great forgiveness. But a lot of us just don't realize that. Then Jesus said to the woman, your sins are forgiven. And then they were baffled and they thought to one another, they were like, whoa, 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 whoa. Who is this man that forgives sins? Only God can forgive sin. I want you to get this picture. You guys remember when Santa kicked Ralphie? Said, "You'll shoot your eye out, kid." Bam. Imagine if Jesus came out from the sidelines and said, hey, Santa, you're forgiven. No connection to Ralphie at all. Santa's like, well, I didn't even kick you. You're not even in a position of offense or to be offended. Unless every sin that is committed is against you. And that's what Jesus was saying. That when you sin, it's all against me. And so not only did Jesus claim to be God, but his followers also claimed that he was God as well. Now, that's a stretch. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, a lot of people's followers thought that their leader was God or the Messiah or the Savior. But let me break this down a little bit further from a first century Jewish context. So we look at pantheism. Pantheism is a belief system that says we believe that God is in all things. Like the tree, God is in the tree. He's in every aspect of creation. Everything kind of makes up God. So when you talk about the God-man, Jesus being fully God and fully man, the pantheist could be like, oh, okay, yeah, well, God is in everything. So sure, no problem. Or you take the Romans and the Greeks, they were polytheists, meaning they believed in a multiplicity of gods. And so for them, they believed in a lot of different gods, and they believed that gods would come to visit them, so much so they wanted to elevate Paul and Barnabas as God was doing miracles through them. They thought to themselves, how is this happening? Surely Zeus and Hermes has come down to visit us. So it would be easy for them to think, okay, the God-man, God in the flesh, maybe the gods have come down to visit us in this man. It wouldn't have been a far stretch. Now, for the first century Jew, they believed that the Messiah was coming for sure, but not in the way that Jesus came. So to get them to believe that Jesus is God in the flesh, that would have been a hard sell. They believe, listen, the first century Jew believes in the one true God of the Bible. Unemphatically, they know and they believe that the Messiah is still coming. They are still waiting for the Messiah to come. They believe that God is separate from his creation. In fact, that he is a self-existing one, that he always was, always is, and will always be. That he is the one who spoke creation into existence. So they definitely were waiting for the Messiah, but to believe that it would be in this man who was born in Bethlehem, humble beginnings, living in Nazareth, son of the carpenter named Joseph, who may or may not be his dad. This would have been such a stretch. No way is it that man. No possible way is it Jesus. And these are the people who are closest to him, believed he was God. Now listen, if I were to go to New York right now, farthest place across the United States, or all the way to the East Coast, I could probably start a religion and persuade a few people that I am the Messiah and I am God. I probably could. And you see me on social media like, wow, they really believe he's God, ha, ha, ha. Because here's the reality. If you think that I could convince my family I'm God, not a chance. Do you think I could convince you I'm God? You're like, bro, you don't even know how to spell a lot of times. Misspelled words on the slides? No way. Like, yeah, you're a great pastor. Like, we love you. But you see my imperfection. You see my inconsistencies. I love you, Pastor, but you're not God. But the people who were closest to Jesus said, no. As much as we don't want to admit it, we've wrestled with it. It's true. His closest followers, friends, and family had to wrestle with Emmanuel, God with us, and it's Jesus. His morality, truth, power, looking at him like, no way, almost to find fault. Please make a mistake. This can't be true. And he just keeps on raising the dead, blind eyes opening, speaking, and the elements and the winds obey him. He's perfect in all that he does. And they're just like, what? Like how is this possible? Can I just tell you, this reality of God with us transformed their life. It didn't just bring comfort, it brought transformation. And almost all of them gave their life for that reality. Can I put this before you, that to the degree you understand Emmanuel, God with us, will determine how you prioritize him. And how you prioritize him determines how you make every decision. And every decision you make brings transformation to your life, whether good or bad. And it's on the other side of this transformation that brings true comfort and joy. But how does that happen? Is it a little cute, little cuddly Christmas? This ain't your mama's Christmas. This is the real Christmas. And can I just say, some of us right now, if we're honest, outside of all the stuff, our lives don't feel super cozy and cuddly. Even if your life is super cozy and cuddly, all you got to do is turn on the TV or open up social media and see the reality of the brokenness of our world and be like, oh yeah. So how does Christmas transform us? I think sometimes it comes in unexpected ways. First one is this, if you're taking notes. Christmas transforms us through crisis. I love the life of Joseph. I've been slowly looking at his life this season. Read through his life a ton of times. Good job, Joe. Take one for the team. Got a little encouragement from the angel. And do what you do, Joe. But this was so huge for him. This was a major role. This was a crisis. First, he finds out that Mary is pregnant by the Spirit, which he doesn't believe. We talked about that last week. And so he basically said, listen, I'm not a jerk, but I'm not gonna marry you. I'm gonna divorce you. We're not doing this. We're not moving forward. Are you tracking with me? And so there's more to the story. So right away, he's like, okay, we're done. And then the angel shows up, like we looked at last week. But look what he says. Do not be afraid. Take Mary home as your wife. Aww. What a nice guy. Come on, Joe, take her home. This is a crisis for Joseph. I don't want to take her home. I want to divorce her. I don't want this. I didn't sign up for this. I didn't ask for this. I've been faithful to the law. I've been honoring to God. I've been a man of reputation my whole life. And in this shame and honor society, everybody's going to do the math. They're going to know as they add up the months that either I slept with her or she slept with somebody else. And what am I going to tell them? God did it? And so you got to understand shame, socially excluded and rejected, second-class citizens forever, a man of the law that spent a lifetime building his reputation. Ladies and gentlemen, this isn't a cute, cozy Christmas. This is a crisis for Joseph. It's a crisis of faith. Can I just tell you, there will be times in your life when you will come to a moment of crisis where God is asking you to stay when you want to leave. And it's almost like I can't even believe what you're asking me to do. You want me to stay? Now, I'm sure, having the angel appear helps a bit. How many of you guys know we don't always get an angel? But for lack of better terms, this popped in my head, so I just threw it in there. I just imagine zookeeper, the animals are starting to speak to him, and he's like, I don't know. I don't know. Like, this is a big deal. When God asks you to step into what you want to divorce, that's a crisis. Listen, when you decide to follow Jesus, can I just tell you, it will cost you. Christmas will cost you. He paid the ultimate price. Christmas is free. The gift of salvation is free, but following Jesus will cost you. For some of you, you'll be exiled from your family. Some people, you'll be cut off from your closest friends. There'll be lifestyles that you're living that God calls you out from, that you're used to living. It's normal, it's comfortable, it's familiar. And God's like, no. I'm calling you out. It'll cost some things. I remember when I came home from St. Louis, this is where I rededicated my life. So imagine this, I left in utter darkness. It's supposed to be a 2-week vacation. I stayed there for 3 months, God just renovating my heart. I felt like when Paul went to Arabia and God was just dealing with him for 3 years, God did that with me for like 3 weeks or 3 months. And I just remember before I was getting ready to come home, I was so scared. I was trembling in my bed before I came home because I was like, I don't want to go back to my old life. And my mom's like, what's wrong with you? I was like, I'm terrified because my life is transforming. And I don't know anything. When I go back, I don't know anything else. I don't have any, my mom's in St. Louis. I have my brother, I have some family here, but my life. So I came home and tried to hang out in some familiar places, and it was just like a fish out of water. I'm like, no, it's like, and it was just me and God. I was scared. I was by myself, showing up to church by myself. Like, okay, God. I'd much easier, like, I love all this, but I want to run away from you, but I know too much. I'd love to divorce this whole thing you're doing because you're really changing me and it's weird. Am I being brainwashed? I don't know what's happening, but I know it's right and I know you're true, but I'd rather divorce this and just go back to what was because it was familiar. And he's like, no, I'm transforming you. See, Tim Keller says it this way, that a crisis is a stage in a sequence of events at which trend all other future events, especially for better or for worse, is determined. It's a turning point where future events, priorities, and decisions are shaped in the place of crisis. Christmas declares Jesus is God, and we are not. And ladies and gentlemen, that is confronting, and that is a crisis. Because what is he saying? I'm God and you're not. Let me show you two responses to Jesus in the New Testament. One response, they wanted to throw him off a cliff. The other response, Peter fell at his knees. And this is really it. Why so extreme? Because there's really only two responses when it comes to Christ. You either reject him or you worship him. The one thing you cannot be is indifferent to him. He's too polarizing. He claims to be God. If he's really God, then he has to become central of everything. He has to become the center of our lives. And if he becomes the center of our lives, that means we have to deal with our life. So he is either insane or crazy, or he's infinite and he's God. And that is a crisis for the human heart. That is a crisis where we're like, but in that furnace, he brings transformation. So many people today, they say, I'm following Jesus. Oh yeah, I understand. But yet there's no transformation in their life. Either one of two things have happened. They have not met the real Jesus, or they have failed to realize and are still discovering the reality of God with us. Because when we get that, it changes everything. So let me ask you this. Where is God calling you to trust him where you want to divorce him? What area of your life is God saying, trust me here? I know you want to leave, but stay. Second thing is this. If you're taking notes, you can jot this down. Christmas transforms us through obedience. You guys are a little quiet. Silent night. Guys good? St. Your Mama's Christmas. Christmas transforms us through obedience. Come on, we're eating vegetables today. I want you to see this text. She will give birth to a son, and you are to give him the name Jesus. Oh, Joseph. You don't even have to think about names. You don't have to go through a list. You don't have to do it with Mary. You got that all worked out for you, Joseph. So cute. So comforting. Not for Joseph. This is a patriarchal culture, society. The father had absolute rights to name his child. Absolute rights. In fact, he had complete rights over the children. And naming was a sign of his control over the family. And the angel said, nope. And so the angel said, no, you're not going to name him. In other words, what he was saying was this. If Jesus is in your life, he is the authority. You are not. Good tidings of comfort and joy. Because see, we love comfort through control. We love that. And that is not Christmas. Let me take you on a little journey, Old Testament. 1 Samuel chapter 13. I'm going to paraphrase 1 Samuel 13 and 15. So King Saul, king over Israel, God appoints him, anoints him as king. And something begins to transpire with Saul. God gave him very clear instructions. Hey, don't do anything until Samuel shows up. And so Saul is waiting at Gilgal, and there's a lot going on. They're in a fight with the Philistines. His men are terrified. They're afraid. They're scattering. They're leaving him. So Saul is trying to remain faithful at Gilgal, but all of a sudden he starts to get in his head. The enemy probably starts to whisper some lies into his ear. And so rather than waiting for Samuel, he's like, no, it's like he's taking too long. The Philistines are coming. My guys are leaving. I need to offer an offering to the Lord. And so he did what he was not supposed to do. Some scholars would say that a king was doing a priestly duty. He should have never did that. But the ultimate reality is, regardless, is that he disobeyed what God had spoken to him. And Samuel shows up like, what did you do? He's like, well. Fast forward. Chapter 15. God says, wipe out the Amalekites. What does Saul do? God says, don't spare anything. What does Saul do? Spares the king, King Agag. And they spare the cattle. God said, destroy all the cattle, destroy the flocks, destroy everything. They spared him. Samuel shows up again. What did you do? I was just obeying the voice of God. No, you weren't. Samuel said, speaking on behalf of the Lord, you used to think of yourself a lot more lowly, but now you've exalted yourself. It says that Saul built a monument to himself. Like he's in the building and he's feeling himself a little too much. And Samuel's like, what have you done? Nothing, no, I just, we're going to offer these sacrifices to the Lord. It's not what he asked you to do. No, man, the people, like the troops, they spared him. Oh, kind of passing the buck a little bit. No, we're going to offer all those rams and we're going to offer them to the Lord. He's like, that's not what God asked you to do. And so he goes on to tell him this. He says, does the Lord delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as much as in obedience to his voice? Behold, obedience is better than sacrifice, and attentiveness is better than the fat of rams. And look what he says. He says, for rebellion is like the sin of divination, and arrogance is like the wickedness of idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord has rejected you as king. Grave consequences. And so we see Saul is moved so much by circumstance and possibility and probability and thinking to himself that he defaulted to relying on religious rituals to gain God's favor rather than trusting and obeying the word of the Lord. And so in other words, this is what Saul was saying. I want to name you. I want to name you. You not name me. I want the authority here. I know how things should go. I know how I want to control. I know how I want to protect. I know how I want to do these things. And I can do it in a way that almost looks religious, looks spiritual, looks like Christmas. But it's rebellion and disobedience to God. Like, let that sit for a moment. And these were his excuses. When I saw that the people were scattered from me, you did not come within the days appointed, and that the Philistines gathered at Michmash. Look what he said. Then I said, let me go ahead and name this scenario. I know how this is going to play out. The Philistines will now come down to me on me at Gilgal. Didn't happen. It was an assumption. He's starting to name, oh God, I know what you said, let me name this. Oh God, I know that this is how you wanted me to wait and to trust. Oh no, let me go ahead and name this circumstance. Let me go ahead and name how this is gonna play out. Let me go ahead and name how this is gonna work. Let me go ahead and name this and take it into my hands. Why? He said, man, I was compelled. He was afraid. Afraid. And then look at the second one in 1 Samuel 15. Then Saul said to Samuel, I have sinned. I have transgressed the Lord's commandment. He finally owns up and was like, okay, maybe the burnt offering thing was a little bit of a stretch. He said, the reality was I feared the people and I obeyed their voice. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe this is, just lean in for a moment. This ain't your mama's Christmas, so bear with me. But can I just tell you, the idol of self-preservation will cause you to be controlled with fear and lead you down a path of rebellion, divination, and witchcraft that looks like arrogance, but also very humble through religious circumstances, through religious practices to clear your conscience, all while neglecting obedience. Are you guys hearing me on that? The idol of self-preservation will control you with fear, lead you down a path of rebellion, divination, and witchcraft that looks religious, but it's arrogant. And it will clear your conscience because, I'm serving, I'm tithing, I'm I'm just kind of godly, I'm putting things in place. I'm just naming this and naming that. And God, I know you said this, but I'm going to name this, I'm going to name that, I'm going to name this, I'm going to name this, I'm going to name this, I'm going to name this. And all of that, it looks good, it clears your conscience for a moment. And the Lord's like, what are you doing? You're being controlled by fear. Fear will deceive you into thinking, listen, you need to name him and not him name you. And so listen, this Christmas, pay attention to where your fears lie, because I promise you, if not dealt with, arrogance and rebellion is on the horizon. So you're like, whoa, this is serious. Yeah, because ladies and gentlemen, he has to name us. Listen, if Jesus is at the center, we have to obey him unconditionally. And can I just tell you, that will be the best adventure of our lives. It won't be a dull Christmas. He made us. He made us. He made everybody that you care about. He knows who we are. He knows what we're made for. He knows what will fit us. Listen, we cannot even know who we are until he's at the center. And through our trust and obedience with him, we begin to discover our identity in him that brings transformation and a lasting comfort where we are never the same, regardless of cute and cozy circumstances. That's what we're longing for. That's what Christmas speaks to. Take your hands off and trust him afraid. He gives grace to the humble, but he humbles the proud. Where do you need to take your hands off and trust him afraid? All Saul had to do was be like, I'm terrified. Well, tell him and keep standing. And don't move until he tells you to. Last one is this. Worship team, you guys can come up. Christmas transforms us, lastly, through service. through service. A lot of times when we think about the comfort of Christmas, notice how we always kind of have us as a part of the equation, but real Christmas is getting outside of us, putting Christ at the center, that God can use us in the earth. Went to Disneyland a couple weeks ago. The expectation for service is huge. You pay a lot of money. I want it to be great. I expect that the happiest place on earth, people should be happy, especially if you're working here. Total different experience. So many rude people. I asked this one guy, you used to be able to say things like, hey, do you have Disney Magic? And people give you a free coffee and you just have fun. People, real diehard Disney people, they'll ride with you still. But I asked this one guy, we were waiting in line, I said, hey, does Disney Magic still work? And he's like, huh. I was like, huh. And then he goes back to his little circle of friends and they start talking. And my kids are watching the whole thing and they just point at us, start laughing. I'm like, oh, I see, we're interrupting your world when you're really supposed to be bringing us into it. And so you got to figure for Joseph, go ahead and take Mary as your wife. She'll give birth to a son. You're to give him the name Jesus. And guess what? Because he will save his people from their sins. Oh, I get this, Lord. You want me to go through all this, but it's not just for my comfort. It's for the comfort of everybody else? Huh. Kind of taking one for the team? Huh. And the angel's like, man, this is so much bigger than you, Joe. Like, you want me to be a part of entering into the brokenness of humanity and use my life to serve people? Huh? Merry Christmas. See, hospitality, it means to welcome the stranger in the Bible. That he came into our world so we could be a part of his world. How special is that? Like we first experienced hospitality from him while we were yet sinners. Christ died for us. He stepped into our brokenness that we could receive his life. Philippians says it this way, that in your relationships with one another, you guys ready for this? Have the same mindset as Christ Jesus. Have the same attitude. Have the same mindset, who being in very nature God did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Another translation says something to be grasped. Jesus did not forfeit his divinity, but he did lay aside his glory. So much so that Isaiah said, you couldn't even tell, like he was not even attractive in his appearance. Like he came humble, didn't even give himself like a good little makeover. Like there was nothing to his appearance that you'd be like, oh, it's a good looking dude. No. Rather, he made himself nothing, taking on the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. God with us. And being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. He had all the privileges that were rightly his as king of the universe, and he gave them up to become an ordinary Jewish baby bound for the cross. And sometimes we can think that Christmas is about our comfort and our joys found in consumption, and Jesus is like, that's not Christmas. It's found in emptying yourself and spending yourself on behalf of the broken and the destitute that couldn't do anything to repay you back. That's where you're gonna have a Merry Christmas. J.I. Packer says it this way, for the Son of God emptied himself and became poor, meant lying aside of glory, a voluntary restraint of power, an acceptance of hardship, isolation, ill treatment, malice, misunderstanding, and finally, a death that involves such agony, spiritually more than physical, that even his mind nearly broke under the prospect of it. It meant love to the uttermost, to the utmost, for unlovely men. That he had every right to stay comfortably where he was in a position of power and glory, but he emptied himself. Why? Because his love drove him to the position of weakness for our sake. 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 9 says, though he was rich, he became poor for our sake, that in his poverty we might become rich. Can I just ask you, ladies and gentlemen, if we were to have that same mindset, where are we emptying ourselves and pouring out our lives, not in obligation, but in response to his love for us and entering our brokenness? How are we then entering into the world with great joy and great confidence and great assurance that people need what we have? And God has said, listen, you want to know where transformation comes from? It doesn't come from consumption. It comes from service. That his love for us moves us into broken areas. You guys remember the parable of the Good Samaritan? It's where our surf standard here at Fountain comes from. Because I left Disneyland one day and I said, there's no way that Disneyland should be marking or setting the bar for hospitality. The church should. So often we can build our comfortable little lives, our comfortable little shells, and like the Levite and the priest, see the brokenness and understand it, even have a little bit of empathy and compassion. But then just like the priest and the Levite, they see the broken man dying on the side of the road and they just say, oh man, hey, a tough deal, man, gotta run. I don't wanna touch you. I don't want to look at you anymore. When in the gospel, what we should really see is, no, I am you. If it wasn't for Christ and the cross, I am you. Let me pick you up on my saddle, put you on my donkey. Let me serve and invest. You're not going to be able to pay me back anything, just like I'll never be able to repay Christ. All of a sudden, emptying our lives becomes a sweet aroma, not just to them, but to us. And it's like, this is what living is all about. Jesus said it is more blessed to give than receive. As we enter into the brokenness of humanity, we're starting to understand Christmas. We're starting to understand how beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news. But when I think about those feet, I don't think about cute little comfort toes in the slippers. I think about Mother Teresa's feet, who would bypass shoes that fit her to give to the next one. As they got donations and they said, one pastor was there traveling, said, what happened to her feet? She asked one of the other ladies and she said, oh, every time a shipment of shoes comes in, she always makes sure that she gets the worst to make sure everybody has the best. And then she's on her feet all day, serving people. Christmas says we need to be willing to go where people are broken spiritually, practically. There's people that have a lot of wealth, but they're wasting away. There's people that have no wealth that are wasting away. There's people with power, with beauty, without beauty that are without beauty that are wasting away. And God calls us to enter into these spaces. And it doesn't have to be crazy. It doesn't have to look crazy, even though God may call you to some crazy stuff, but it can look as simple as an invite. It can look as simple as, hey, can I pick you up? Come to church with me. Hey, let's partner with Monthly Miracles and invest in some people's lives that could use a lot of Christmas in the gospel. It doesn't have to be complicated. But can I just tell you, Christmas will cost you. But on the other side of that cost, there's good tidings of comfort and joy beyond what you could fathom, beyond your little comfy, cozy life and my life. When you begin to enter into the brokenness of humanity, it'll change you. And Jesus will be glorified and lives will be saved and restored. So let me just ask you one more time. If you're in a crisis of faith right now, let God use it. Don't divorce where he's calling you to lean in. And where fear is controlling you because you're trying to protect your little and your name and everything, it's not gonna end well. Trust him and do it afraid. And look around and ask God for him to break your heart for the brokenness around us, that we would spend ourselves on others the way he spent himself on us, with joy, with gladness, and light. All this is in light of all he's done for us. It's not with obligation. It's not I have to. For God so loved, I'd love to. I get to. It's my reasonable response to all he's done for me. Will you stand to your feet? Let me pray for you.